Good morning. It is Monday, December the 17th, and this is The Drill. And thank you very much. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States of America today, because I'm the only one that makes the presumption for the status quo. Speaking to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. Last week, on Facebook, I came across a news article that said that the caravan, members of the caravan that are currently in Mexico and seeking to get into the United States, have gone to the American consulate in Tijuana and made a demand. And the demand is that the United States government pay each one of the caravan members $50,000, and if the United States does that, and then I think there was, $50,000, and the caravan members will go back home. The leader of the caravan was telling an interviewer or news person that although $50,000 sounds like a lot of money per person, it is very small in comparison to the amount of money stolen by the United States of America from Honduras. There is no such thing. No money was ever stolen from Honduras by the United States of America. Mr. Whoever it is, let's call him Jose. So Jose, the leader of the caravan, says that we've stolen and is using the connotative rather than the denotative use of the word stolen. He is waxing poetic. It's what Ayn Rand referred to as poetic sloppiness. His allegation is arbitrary. It's not true. It's not false. It's simply arbitrary. He provides no proof, no evidence that any such thing has occurred. So therefore, his claim must be ignored. So when I come back, I'm going to be reading today from Ayn Rand's lexicon, and also from the 10 books that screwed up the world and 5 that didn't help, and the 10 books that all conservatives must read when I come back. And thank you very much. Welcome back. And from the Ayn Rand lexicon, the definition de jure, or the concept de jure, is the word definitions. A definition is a statement that identifies the nature of the units subsumed under a concept. It is often said that definitions state the meaning of words. This is true, but it is not exact. A word is merely a visual auditory symbol used to represent a concept. A word has no meaning other than that of the concept it symbolizes, and the meaning of a concept consists of its units. It's not words, but concepts that man defines by specifying their reference. The purpose of a definition is to distinguish a concept from all other concepts, and thus to keep its units differentiated from all other existence. Since the definition of a concept is formulated in terms of other concepts, it enables man not only to identify and retain a concept, but also to establish the relationships, the hierarchy, the integration of all his concepts, and thus the integration of his knowledge. Definitions preserve not the chronological order in which a given man may have learned concepts, but the logical order of their hierarchical interdependence. With certain significant exceptions, every concept can be defined and communicated in terms of other concepts. The exceptions are concepts referring to sensations and metaphysical axioms. The rules of correct definition are derived from the process of concept formation. The units of a concept were differentiated by means of a distinguishing characteristic from other existents possessing a commensurable characteristic, a conceptual common denominator. A definition follows the same principle. It specifies the distinguishing characteristics of the units and indicates the category of existence from which they were differentiated. The distinguishing characteristics of the units become the differentia of a concept's definition. The existence possessing a conceptual common denominator become the genus. And I'm going to stop it right there. This is quite a lengthy concept that she's going to be discussing, so I'm going to be dealing with it over the next several days. But she finally gets to the point there that the definition of a definition is genus and differentia. So when I come back, I'm going to be reading from the 10 books that screwed up the world and 5 that didn't help. And thank you very much, and welcome back. And this is Chapter 5 of the book written by Benjamin Wiker called The 10 Books That Screwed Up the World and 5 That Didn't Help. And I like it because it goes into, again, the philosophies, the underlying ideas that create the culture that we live in today. And Chapter 5, the title is The Manifesto of the Communist Party, 1848. The history of all hitherto existing societies, the history of class struggle. So says Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Never have so few pages done so much damage. The damage has for the most part already been accomplished, and Marxism itself, outside China, mainly stirs papers at academic conferences. But communism offered one heck of a lesson. On body count alone, the Communist Manifesto could win the award for the most malicious book ever written. Now that we have more accurate calculations of corpses, perhaps upwards of 100 million, even the tenured Marxists are a bit squeamish about tooting the manifesto as a horn of plenty. But as it has obviously failed so miserably, we must ask, why has it succeeded so magnificently? What is it about Marx's grand vision that inspired his disciples to clamber up the pile of corpses to have a better look? Before beginning, however, I must address an offensive criticism of the approach I'm going to take. I mean, quote, offensive, unquote, in both senses, as if the best defense were merely to be offensive. Francis Huyn, in his otherwise fine biography of Marx, sets off sailing with the remark that, quote, only a fool could hold Marx responsible for the Gulag, but there is, alas, a ready supply of fools. Should philosophers be blamed for any and every subsequent mutilation of their ideas, unquote? We assume from his rhetorical tone that our answer must be, quote, of course not, unquote, but that would reveal dangerous ignorance of one of philosophy's most profound questions. That question, quote, should philosophers be blamed for any and every subsequent mutilation of their ideas, unquote, was near and dear to the 3 greatest philosophers who ever lived, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. It is not a fool's question. It was asked by Plato and Aristotle when the disciples of Socrates began to gravitate toward the support of political tyranny. One might even say that one of the great differences between ancient and modern philosophy is that ancient philosophy takes this question with the utmost seriousness, and modern philosophy dismisses it as foolish. Being a partisan of the ancients, I suggest that if Marx himself had attended to this question, Marxism's corpse count might have been considerably lower. Perhaps, like some others, Huyn is assuming that philosophy isn't dangerous, another modern error, because it is merely a thought in someone's head or a word on someone's book, on some book's page. Sticks and stones can break our bones, but words can never harm us, that kind of thing. It is for this reason, I think, that Huyn puts the matter so abstractly, speaking of philosophers in a general way, not about the particular philosophy under consideration. If Lenin, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, and other professing Marxists were responsible for such egregious mutilations of humanity, then it is certainly legitimate, and even morally mandatory, to ask what it is about their masters' works that inspired them to such epic crimes. One would have had to have been a fool to ignore such an inquiry. Moreover, the manifesto of the Communist Party was no mere philosophical theory. It was to call to political action, quote, a specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. It is high time that communists should openly, in the face of the whole world, publish their views, their aims, their tendencies, and meet this nursery tale of the specter of communism with a manifesto of the party itself, unquote. Karl Marx, the primary author of the manifesto, penned it for the Communist League in January 1848. 5 months shy of his 30th birthday. He was a supremely self-assured revolutionary whose characteristic traits were intelligence, political inexperience, and most prominent of all, an unconquerable desire to press his arguments upon all detractors, especially his fellow communists. Marx didn't invent communism, nor was he the only one agitating for revolutionary changes at the midpoint of the 19th century. But he was, as Engels himself admitted, a dictator of any organization of which he was a part. And so he put his stamp down hard on the subsequent development of communism in Europe. Here's a revealing description by one Karl Schurz, who witnessed Marx in full plumage. Quote, "I've never seen a man whose bearing was so provoking and intolerable. To no opinion which differed from his own did he accord the honor of even condescending consideration. Every one who contradicted him he treated with abject contempt. Every argument that he did not like he answered either with biting scorn at the unfathomable ignorance that had prompted it, or with opprobrious aspersions upon the motives of him who had advanced it. He denounced everyone who dared to oppose his opinion." Unquote. It is no wonder that there were only 11 mourners at Marx's funeral, not counting the corpse. We mention these traits of Marx because they illuminate the essence of Marxism. It's an ideology fashioned according to a man's image and forced on history with all the uncompromising power a grand theory can muster when it is disburdened of the possibility of contradiction from the facts. It is a theory full of youthful zeal in the very worst sense. Long ago, Aristotle warned that young men are incapable of listening to lectures on political philosophy because they're doubly disadvantaged. They're overflowing with enthusiasm for changing the world, and this trait is all the more dangerous because they have so little knowledge of it. To them, everything seems possible, so they're especially prone to latching onto overly cerebral utopian political schemes that fix every single problem in short order. That is why, if we recall our words above about philosophers being blamed for their ideas, Aristotle did not follow Socrates in his habit of speaking philosophically about politics with the young. Too many of Socrates' young protégés end up endorsing tyranny. Marxism represents a peculiarly modern kind of tyranny, the tyranny of an idea over reality. And I'm going to go ahead and stop it right there. And he hits the nail right on the head with regards to Marxism. And I've heard it said that Marxism is basically not even really a political philosophy. What it really is techniques, a series of techniques for gaining and maintaining power. So when I come back, I'm going to be reading from the book, The 10 Books That Every Conservative Must Read. Thank you. Thank you. And the 10 books that every conservative must read, also written by Benjamin Wiker, because he was prompted to after he'd written the 10 books that screwed up the world. People were asking, well, what should we read then, if not the books that you have just described? So he came up with a list of 10 books that we should read and one imposter. But so in this chapter, he's dealing with Aristotle, and in this section, it's called The Hard Bits of Aristotle's Argument. Liberals will be quick to remind us that Aristotle also believed that slavery was natural and that the familial and political subordination of women was natural. Some liberals might say that what they support is not moral relativism, but liberation from unjust traditions upheld by conservatives like Aristotle. But this is to miss a very important point about true conservatism. It is tied to particular principles, not inextricably bound to a particular man or book or particular political order. Aristotle believed, as true conservatives do, that the wisdom gained from experience should be our guide. And so if we err, we can and must amend our views, just as Aristotle corrected what he thought were errors in the thought of Plato. Conservatism is not blind acceptance, but careful consideration, and that includes reconsideration. Aristotle wrongly believed that slavery is natural. He was wrong about other things as well. He believed that the law should allow, even demand, the killing by exposure of deformed children, that the state should determine the number of children parents may have, and that those children conceived beyond this number should be aborted in the first trimester. We can reject all these things as wrong if, and only if, we believe that it is possible to be right. That is, only if we assume, with Aristotle and against ancient sophists and modern moral relativists, there is an objective moral order that we can know and follow. We must also point out for the record that it was Christianity that historically allowed for the correction of Aristotle in regard to slavery as well as abortion and infanticide. With all that said, let's look more carefully at Aristotle's discussion of women and slaves, for even among errors here there are insights. Aristotle says that, quote, the female is distinguished by nature from the slave. The barbarians, though, regard the female and slave to be of the same order, unquote. In short, Aristotle marks a barbarian, barbarous, precisely in his use of the female as a slave. This is not a small point, as any honest anthropologist will reveal. In a large majority of primitive cultures, precisely those that didn't own slaves, women performed a great portion of the back-breaking menial tasks that must be done for any society to survive. It follows, perhaps somewhat uncomfortably, that historically the first emancipation of women came with the institution of slavery. Or, to put the same point in a broader context, the societies in which women had the most leisure and political power were those where upper-class women depended on lower-class or slave laborers of both sexes. So Aristotle did not see women as slaves. He asserted that only barbarians did. Therefore, he did not see the relationship of husband and wife or parents and children in terms of master and slave. Instead, he uses overtly political terms. He compares the man's governing of a household to political rule. The just man is no despot over his family. Rather, he rules his quote, wife and children as free persons, though it is not the same mode of rule in each case, the wife being ruled in a political way and the children in a kingly fashion, unquote. In the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle remarks that the kind of friendship that unites husband and wife is aristocratic, and the father's friendship toward his children should be kingly. This political language might strike us as quite odd, but it allows Aristotle to avoid being conservative in the worst distorted sense, defending the family by defending tyrannical husbands and fathers. Here, as everywhere, Aristotle distinguishes between good and bad, just and unjust. Because Aristotle uses specifically political terms to make that distinction, we need to move beyond the family and look at Aristotle's account of political regimes. And that will be coming up next week, the next time that I go ahead and cover this book. So that brings us to the conclusion of another episode of The Drill. And until next time, thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.